I am Nia, 32 years old, and my husband authorized my death sentence from a VIP booth at a crowded nightclub. When the hospital called him for emergency consent after my severe car crash, he told them to pull the plug so he could get back to his date. He thought he was getting rid of his unremarkable, financially dependent wife to start a new life. He had no idea that I secretly owned the multi-million-dollar medical technology firm that supplied the very life support machines keeping me alive. Before I tell you how I tore his perfect world apart piece by piece, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever dimmed your own light to make a fragile man feel tall. I sit here tonight in my penthouse swirling a glass of expensive Cabernet. I watch the dark red liquid coat the crystal, the rich color reminding me of the blood I nearly lost. I take a slow sip and let the warmth settle in my chest. It is a stark contrast to the freezing, sterile environment of the hospital room where my entire reality shattered just a few weeks ago. I remember waking up to the rhythmic beeping of monitors, my body heavy and wrapped in bandages. The smell of antiseptic stung my nose. I had survived a horrific collision on the highway, a miracle according to the nursing staff. But the real trauma was not the broken bones or the bruised ribs. The real trauma walked into my room in the form of Dr. Sterling. Dr. Sterling was a kind man with tired eyes and a gentle demeanor. He checked my vitals, asked me standard neurological questions, and then he pulled up a chair beside my bed. He looked profoundly uncomfortable. He explained that when I was brought into the emergency room unconscious and bleeding, my condition was critical. They needed immediate consent for a risky, life-saving surgical procedure. They called my emergency contact. They called my husband of 5 years, Marcus. Dr. Sterling explained that hospital protocol required them to record all emergency consent phone calls for legal purposes. He said that because I was now awake and legally required to update my medical directives, I needed to hear how my primary proxy had responded to the crisis. He pressed play on his tablet. The audio filled the quiet hospital room. First, there was the heavy thumping bass of club music. It was so loud it vibrated through the small speaker. Then came the unmistakable sound of ice clinking against glass, followed by a woman giggling right into the receiver. "Marcus, who is bothering us?" the woman whined. Her voice was high-pitched, teasing, and entirely unfamiliar to me. Then I heard Marcus, my loving, devoted husband. His voice was laced with annoyance, not panic, not fear for his bleeding wife, just pure irritation. "Look, Doc, I am really busy right now," Marcus said over the pulsating music. "If she is brain dead or whatever, just pull the plug. Do not rack up a massive medical bill to keep a vegetable alive. I am her husband, and I am making the call. Let her go. I have a situation to handle here. Do not call this number again tonight." The recording clicked off. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Sterling looked down at his hands, unable to meet my gaze. The hospital had to proceed using emergency life-saving protocols, overriding his refusal, because my injuries were physical, not neurological. But the intent of my husband was crystal clear. I lay there in that hospital bed staring at the ceiling tiles. I did not cry. The betrayal was so massive, so incomprehensibly cruel, that it bypassed my tear ducts entirely and went straight to my core, freezing my heart into a solid block of ice. "Pull the plug. Do not rack up a massive bill." Those words echoed in my mind, bouncing off the walls of my skull. For 5 years I had lived a lie, a carefully constructed, exhausting lie, all to protect the fragile, pathetic ego of the man who had just sentenced me to death over the phone. When Marcus and I met, he was an ambitious but struggling junior analyst. I was already the quiet founder of a rapidly expanding tech firm. But Marcus had traditional views. He needed to be the provider. He needed to feel like the man of the house. He often made passing insecure comments about successful women emasculating their partners. So blinded by love and a foolish desire for domestic peace, I shrank myself. I stepped back from the public face of my company. I hired a CEO to act as the figurehead while I ran my empire from the shadows. I told Marcus I was a freelance consultant making a modest, unremarkable income. For 5 long years, I dumbed myself down. I let him explain basic financial concepts to me at the dinner table while I nodded and smiled. I secretly paid off our mortgage through a dummy corporation, letting him believe his annual bonuses were covering our lifestyle. I shopped at discount stores when he was around, hiding my designer clothes in a private storage unit. I cooked his meals, ironed his shirts, and praised his mediocre achievements, all while managing international corporate mergers from my laptop while he slept. I sacrificed my pride, my identity, and my voice just so Marcus could walk around feeling like a giant. And this was my reward. While I was bleeding out on a stretcher, he was buying overpriced drinks for another woman at a club. He viewed me as a financial burden, a disposable accessory that was suddenly costing him too much money. He was ready to let me die just so he would not have to pay a hospital bill. The absolute pathetic joke of it all washed over me. I had hidden millions of dollars in personal wealth so my husband would not feel insecure about his meager salary, and he had tried to kill me over a medical expense I could have paid off with pocket change. The devoted, accommodating wife died on that hospital bed. She flatlined the second that recording ended. As the shock faded, a new sensation took over. It was a hot, terrifying, beautiful rage. It coursed through my veins, acting like a stimulant, pushing away the pain of my injuries. Marcus thought he was the powerful provider. He thought he held the keys to my life and my future. He had no idea that he had just declared war on a woman who could buy and sell his entire existence before breakfast. I thanked Dr. Sterling for his honesty and asked for my personal cell phone. My hands were steady as I gripped the device. I did not call Marcus. I did not text him to ask about the other woman or scream about his betrayal. Emotional reactions were what Marcus expected from his plain-dependent wife. But that woman was gone. Instead, I opened my encrypted email application and sent a message to my lead corporate attorney and my wealth manager. I needed my shell companies unraveled. I needed the real estate deeds brought out of the shadows. I needed Marcus investigated, his accounts frozen, and his perfect little illusion prepared for absolute demolition. He wanted to pull the plug on me. Now I was going to pull the plug on his entire reality. I set the phone down on the sterile tray table. The tiny screen went dark, but the glow of my new reality burned bright. I looked at the plastic tube feeding fluids into my vein. It represented weakness. It represented the helpless woman Marcus thought he could just switch off. I refused to shed a single tear for a man who calculated my net worth while I was bleeding on the asphalt. My hand moved before my conscious mind even registered the decision. I gripped the medical tape holding the IV needle in place and ripped it off. A sharp sting bit into my skin as I pulled the needle free. A bright drop of crimson welled up on my forearm, a stark contrast to the pale hospital sheets. The heart monitor beside me immediately began to shriek a frantic, high-pitched alarm that shattered the quiet of the ward. The door swung open and 2 nurses rushed in, their faces pale with panic. They reached for my arm, babbling about infection risks and blood pressure, but I held up a hand. The gesture was sharp, authoritative, and completely devoid of the meekness I had performed for the last 5 years. I told them to turn the alarm off. My voice was steady, commanding a room the way I commanded boardrooms across the globe. They hesitated, confused by the sudden transformation of their trauma patient. I did not repeat myself. I pointed to the plastic belongings bag sitting on the visitor chair. I demanded my laptop. One of the nurses, intimidated by the sheer force of my gaze, handed me the bag. I tore it open and pulled out the matte black device. It was a custom-built machine heavily encrypted, the true center of my world. Dr. Sterling rushed into the room, his white coat flapping behind him. He saw the disconnected IV and the blood on my arm. He started speaking rapidly about liability and critical care protocols. I ignored him. I flipped the laptop open and typed in my 32-character alphanumeric passcode. The screen illuminated, displaying the proprietary operating system of Apex Medical Solutions. My company. The same company that manufactured the very life support systems humming in the intensive care units down the hall. I quickly navigated to the hospital network interface to approve the transfer of my own medical records to my private physician. Dr. Sterling stepped closer, trying to close my laptop. Then his eyes caught the glowing logo on the screen and the executive credentials blinking in the top right corner. The color drained from his face. He looked from the screen to me, his jaw slack. Chairwoman, he breathed out the title slipping from his lips before he could stop it. He recognized me. Of course he did. He had likely attended the annual medical tech summits where I delivered keynote addresses from behind a screen of heavily vetted security protocols. He realized in that split second that the woman lying in his trauma ward, the woman whose husband had just casually ordered her death over a nightclub soundtrack, was the primary supplier for his entire hospital network. I did not confirm or deny the title. I simply looked at him and demanded the discharge papers. Dr. Sterling stammered, citing medical regulations and the severe risk of internal bleeding. He warned me that leaving against medical advice could be fatal. I told him that staying married to Marcus was far more fatal to my well-being than any physical injury I currently possessed. I demanded the forms immediately. He knew better than to argue with the head of Apex Medical. He returned minutes later with a thick stack of paperwork. I signed every page with a firm, unwavering signature, legally absolving the hospital of any responsibility for my survival. A nurse timidly approached the bed, holding a pair of cheap, generic hospital sweatpants and a faded shirt. She offered them to me, assuming I would want clean clothes to leave in. I looked at the pathetic garments and shook my head. I ordered them to bring me the clothes I was wearing when the ambulance brought me in. They looked at me like I was insane. The dress was ruined, they protested. It was an emerald green silk evening gown, now shredded at the hem and stiff with dried blood. It was a horrific sight, a tangible map of the violence my body had endured. But I wanted it. I needed it. That ruined dress was my battle armor. It was the physical proof that I had survived the crash that was supposed to end me, and the crash of my marriage that was supposed to break me. I slipped out of the hospital bed, my muscles screaming in protest. Every movement was agony, a sharp reminder of cracked ribs and bruised tissue. I gritted my teeth and refused to make a sound. With slow, deliberate movements, I discarded the flimsy hospital gown and pulled the torn, blood-soaked silk over my body. The fabric clung to my bandages. I looked in the small mirror above the sink. My face was pale, a dark purple bruise blossoming across my cheekbone, my hair matted with dried blood. I did not look like the compliant, soft-spoken wife Marcus knew. I looked like a ghost returning from the grave to collect a debt. I walked barefoot out of the hospital room. The cold linoleum sent a shock up my spine with every step. Doctors and nurses stopped in their tracks as I moved down the corridor. I must have looked like a nightmare walking. A battered woman in a shredded, bloody evening gown, striding through the sterile halls with the posture of an absolute sovereign. Dr. Sterling followed me at a distance, hovering like a nervous shadow completely out of his depth. I did not look back. I pushed through the heavy automatic sliding doors and stepped out into the crisp, biting night air. The damp city wind whipped around me, but I did not shiver. At the exact moment my bare feet touched the pavement of the drop-off zone, a massive matte black bulletproof SUV pulled smoothly up to the curb. It was a vehicle from my private security fleet, the one I kept stationed miles away from the modest townhouse I shared with Marcus. The rear door swung open immediately. My head of security, a towering man named Vance, stepped out. He took one look at my bruised face and the blood-stained silk of my dress, and his expression hardened into pure granite. He did not ask questions. He simply extended a steady hand. I took it and stepped up into the warm, leather-lined interior of the fortress on wheels. The heavy door slammed shut, sealing me away from the hospital, from the vulnerability, and from the lie I had been living. I settled back against the dark leather, the tinted windows hiding me from the world. Vance handed me a secure tablet connected directly to my wealth management firm. The engine roared to life, a deep, powerful sound that vibrated through the floorboards. I tapped the screen, bringing up the live financial feeds of my shell companies, the deeds to the properties, the hidden accounts. I watched the numbers digitize and flow an ocean of wealth that I had kept locked away to coddle a man who viewed my life as an inconvenience. I pictured him right now. Marcus is raising a glass in the $8 million penthouse, but he doesn't know who owns the carpet he's standing on. The heavy SUV glides through the neon-lit streets of the financial district. I stare out the tinted window, watching the blur of streetlights cast long shadows across the leather interior. My body aches with a dull, throbbing intensity, a constant reminder of the metal and glass that nearly crushed the life out of me hours ago, but my mind has never been sharper. Vance drives us straight to the underground private parking garage of the most exclusive residential high-rise in the city. This is the building where my husband currently resides. He believes his firm secured this $8 million penthouse as a corporate perk for his outstanding performance. He believes he pays a highly subsidized, modest rent. He does not know that the property management group is a dummy corporation registered to my holdings and that I bought this entire top floor in cash 3 years ago. Vance parks the vehicle directly in front of the private elevator bank, reserved strictly for the penthouse. I step out of the SUV, my bare feet hitting the freezing polished concrete of the garage. Vance moves swiftly to support me, his large hand hovering near my shoulder, his face etched with silent concern. I give him a single sharp look and shake my head. I will walk into my own home under my own power. I press the call button. The polished brass doors slide open silently. I step inside the mirrored cabin, and the doors glide shut, sealing me in. The reflection staring back at me from the elevator mirrors is jarring. The emerald silk of my evening gown is torn entirely up the left thigh, the delicate fabric stiff and ruined with dark patches of dried blood. My skin is deathly pale, a massive dark purple bruise blossoming across my cheekbone, my hair tangled and matted with debris from the highway. I look like a casualty of a brutal war, and in many ways I am. But as the elevator ascends smoothly, carrying me up 40 floors, I feel the final remnants of the meek, supportive wife shedding from my bones. I am a victor, arriving to claim the spoils. The elevator chimes softly. The doors open directly into the grand foyer of the penthouse. The heavy, pulsating beat of electronic dance music spills into the entryway, vibrating against the soles of my bare feet. The air is thick with the cloying scent of expensive cologne, fine perfume, and catered hors d'oeuvres. I step off the elevator and walk onto the imported Persian rug I personally selected at an auction in Dubai. I move past the foyer and step into the main living space. The sheer scale of the party is staggering. There are at least 50 people packed into the massive open concept room. Waiters in crisp white shirts circulate through the crowd, balancing silver trays of champagne flutes and caviar. Men in custom-tailored Italian suits laugh loudly, with their heads thrown back, while women in haute couture dresses lean in close to stroke their egos. It is a sea of wealth, polish, and absolute arrogance. For a few seconds, I am entirely invisible. I am just a dark shadow lingering at the edge of a vibrant room. Then a young woman holding a crystal martini glass turns to admire the artwork on the wall and makes direct eye contact with me. Her eyes widen in absolute horror. The color instantly drains from her perfectly contoured face. She opens her mouth and lets out a piercing, terrified scream. The glass slips from her trembling fingers and shatters against the marble floor, the sharp, violent sound cutting directly through the heavy bass of the music. The DJ station near the balcony doors frantically hits a button on his mixing board, killing the music dead. The sudden silence in the room is suffocating. 50 heads turn simultaneously in my direction. The crowd parts like the Red Sea, stumbling backward and bumping into each other to get away from me, as if I am carrying a highly contagious disease. I stand completely still under the warm glow of the massive crystal chandelier. The visual contrast is stark and violent. I am a bloody, barefoot, bruised apparition standing in the dead center of a pristine, high society celebration. I see their eyes scanning the shredded, bloody silk of my gown, the dark stains coating my skin, the raw, open wound on my cheekbone. They are terrified, disgusted, and utterly confused by my presence. Then at the far end of the room, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook the glittering city skyline, I see him. Marcus. He is wearing a midnight blue velvet smoking jacket, holding a glass of vintage scotch in one hand. His other hand rests intimately, possessively, on the exposed lower back of a stunning, impossibly thin blonde woman, wearing a tight silver dress. It is the woman from the phone call. The woman whining about the interruption, while I was bleeding out on a hospital stretcher. Marcus turns his head, clearly annoyed by the sudden loss of music and the disruption of his perfect evening. His eyes sweep over the parted crowd and lock onto mine across the expanse of the room. I wait for the shock to register on his face. I wait for the panic of a husband seeing his wife brutalized and severely injured. I wait for him to drop his expensive Scotch push past the crowd and run to my side. He does absolutely none of those things. Instead, his handsome, symmetrical face contorts into a mask of pure, unfiltered fury. His jaw clenches so hard, a muscle twitches in his cheek, his nostrils flare. There is not a single drop of relief that I am alive. There is no horror at my injuries. There is only intense burning embarrassment that I have ruined his highly curated moment. He pulls his hand away from the blonde woman and marches across the room. The guests shrink back, giving him a wide berth. His heavy leather dress shoes strike the marble floor with aggressive, angry thuds. He stops less than a foot away from me, his chest heaving with indignation. He does not ask if I am okay. He does not ask what happened to the car. He does not even look at the blood soaking my clothes. "What the hell are you doing here?" He hisses, his voice a low, venomous whisper, deliberately designed to stay under the radar of the listening guests. I look up at him, my expression completely blank, my heart beating with a steady, icy rhythm. I am standing in my own home. "Marcus," I reply, my voice steady and completely devoid of emotion. He grabs my upper arm. His fingers dig brutally into a massive, tender bruise blooming under my skin. A sharp spike of agonizing pain shoots up to my shoulder, but I absolutely refuse to flinch. I do not break eye contact. I let him show me exactly who he is right here in front of everyone. "Are you out of your goddamn mind?" he snarls, leaning in so close I can smell the sharp bite of alcohol on his breath. "Look at you. You look like a slaughtered animal. You look like a homeless psycho wandering in off the street. Do you have any idea what you are doing right now?" I remain completely silent, letting his vile words hang in the heavy air between us. "The managing partners of Sterling Capital are standing right over there," he says, gesturing aggressively with his free hand toward a group of older men who are watching us with blatant disapproval. "We are celebrating the closing of a $15 million investment deal. My promotion to senior partner rests entirely on this single merger. This is the most important night of my entire career, and you drag yourself in here looking like a piece of trash to embarrass me." His grip on my arm tightens painfully. He is practically shaking with rage. "I was told you were in a massive accident," he continues, his tone dripping with intense resentment. "I was told you were on life support and might not make it through the night. So why are you standing here ruining my life?" The sheer audacity of his words washes over me. He is genuinely furious that I did not have the basic decency to die quietly in the hospital. He is furious that my survival has interrupted his victory lap with his mistress and his business partners. I process his frantic bragging about a $15 million deal. To him, it is the pinnacle of human achievement. To me, it is a minor rounding error on a quarterly balance sheet. "You are drunk, you are bleeding all over the floor, and you are thoroughly humiliating me." Marcus spits out, his face inches from mine. "You need to leave. Right now. You are going to turn around, walk back into that elevator, and take the service exit down to the basement alley. Do not speak to anyone. Do not look at anyone. Get out of my penthouse before you destroy the one good thing I have going for me." He attempts to physically shove me backward toward the elevator doors, but I plant my bare feet firmly on the silk rug. I brace my core and I do not move a single inch. The unexpected physical resistance catches him completely off guard. He stops pushing. He looks at me, really looks at me, and for the very first time in our 5-year marriage, he sees a complete stranger staring back at him. I look past his shoulder, casually scanning the silent room. I see the blonde woman in the silver dress glaring at me with open hostility, crossing her arms over her chest. I see the wealthy investors whispering behind their hands, judging the messy domestic dispute. I see the opulent flower arrangements, the overflowing champagne towers, the absolute excess of a party funded entirely by the pathetic illusion of his success. "Take your hands off me, Marcus," I say softly. The volume of my voice is low, but the absolute crushing authority behind it echoes through the silent room like a gunshot. Marcus freezes. His fingers slowly uncurl from my bruised arm, his eyes widening in genuine shock. In all the years we have been together, I have never raised my voice. I have never given a command. I have played the role of the soft, accommodating wife so perfectly that my sudden defiance leaves him entirely speechless. He takes a half step backward, his mouth opening and closing like a fish suffocating on dry land. Before he can recover his composure, the sharp, rapid clicking of stiletto heels echoes across the marble floor. The crowd parts once more, and my sister-in-law Tasha struts into the clearing. Tasha is wearing a custom sequined gown that tightly hugs her figure, her neck draped in heavy gold jewelry that catches the light of the chandelier. She is Marcus's older sister, and she has made a career out of looking down her perfectly sculpted nose at me. She stops beside her brother, placing one hand on her hip, and looks me up and down with an expression of profound disgust. She does not gasp at the sight of my blood or the horrific bruising on my face. She only scowls at the dark stains my bare feet are leaving on the Persian rug. "Marcus, what is this creature doing here?" Tasha demands, her voice loud enough for the entire room to hear. She points a manicured finger at me. "Tell me you are going to have the building staff professionally scrub this carpet." She is dripping fluids everywhere. It is absolutely unsanitary. Tasha lets out a dramatic sigh and shakes her head, turning to the wealthy guests who are watching the spectacle. "I apologize for this wretched display, everyone," Tasha announces, her tone dripping with fake elegance. "My brother has the unfortunate habit of dating women from the bottom of the barrel. We warned him about marrying so far beneath his station." She turns her piercing glare back to me. Her eyes are filled with pure venom. "You have always been a pathetic, desperate little mouse, Nia. But this is a new low even for you. Showing up to a high society gathering looking like a feral street beggar. We are the Vanguard family. We have a reputation to uphold. We come from a proud lineage of old money African aristocrats. We are elites. We are visionaries. You are nothing but a common uneducated HR clerk. You do not belong in this room, and you certainly do not belong in our bloodline." I stare at her, my face completely impassive. Old money African aristocrats. The phrase echoes in my mind, and it takes every ounce of my willpower not to burst into a cold, hollow laugh. The Vanguard family lineage is the greatest work of fiction Tasha has ever produced. There is no old money. There is no aristocratic bloodline. Their grandfather sold used auto parts in a rundown lot, and their father died with a second mortgage on a modest suburban home, leaving behind nothing but a mountain of unpaid medical bills. The entire Vanguard family is a hollow shell built on leased luxury and maxed-out credit cards. I know this because I am the one who secretly funded their illusion. When Marcus and I first married, I ran a quiet background check on his family. I discovered that Tasha was drowning in over $400,000 of consumer debt. She had taken out predatory loans to fund her lavish lifestyle, buying designer bags and throwing opulent parties to convince her social circle that she was royalty. I watched her struggle to keep the repo men away while aggressively maintaining her fake aesthetic online. Because I loved Marcus, and because I wanted to protect his family from complete ruin, I used one of my anonymous shell companies to quietly buy up Tasha's debt. I restructured her loans to a 0% interest rate and paid off the most aggressive collectors. I gave her room to breathe. I essentially bought the designer gown she is currently wearing to insult me. She is a parasite calling the host a peasant, completely unaware that she is feeding off my hidden wealth. Before Tasha can hurl another insult, a tall man in a bespoke gray suit steps up behind her, placing a calming hand on her shoulder. It is Preston, Tasha's husband. Preston is a white corporate lawyer who speaks with a perpetual condescending drawl. He views himself as the intellectual anchor of the Vanguard family, the rational male authority figure who must swoop in to handle the emotional hysteria of women. Preston adjusts his silk tie and gives me a patronizing smile, the kind of smile one might give a confused toddler. "Now, Nia, let us take a deep breath and be reasonable about this," Preston says, keeping his voice low and soothing. "You have clearly been in a little fender bender. You are highly emotional. You are probably dealing with a mild concussion which explains this erratic and inappropriate behavior." I do not blink. I simply watch him perform his smug routine. "Let me speak to you in terms you can process." Preston continues, taking a step closer to me. "You work in human resources. You process payroll. You handle vacation requests and mediate petty office disputes. That is honest, simple work. But what is happening in this room tonight is macro finance. This is high-level corporate structuring." Marcus is finalizing a $15 million merger with Sterling Capital. These are incredibly complex, fragile economic ecosystems. Preston gestures broadly to the men in the expensive suits who are whispering by the bar. "The men in this room manage global assets, Nia. They do not have the time or the patience for domestic drama. You cannot comprehend the magnitude of what Marcus is trying to accomplish tonight. If you throw a tantrum and jeopardize this deal, you will cost this family a fortune that your little HR salary could not pay back in 10 lifetimes. So be a good girl, turn around, and go find a clinic. Let the men handle the business." The sheer suffocating arrogance of his speech hangs in the air. Let the men handle the business. I look at Preston taking in his tailored suit and his perfectly styled hair. I know his secrets, too. Preston likes to parade around as a high-powered attorney, but his boutique law firm has been operating at a net loss for the last 3 consecutive quarters. He recently defaulted on the lease for his downtown office space. 2 weeks ago, my financial advisors flagged a highly suspicious transfer of funds from one of Preston's client escrow accounts into his personal checking account. He is stealing from his own clients to keep his fake aristocratic lifestyle afloat. He is a mediocre failing lawyer standing mere inches away from disbarment and federal prison, and he is lecturing me about macro finance. He is lecturing the sole owner and chairwoman of a multinational medical technology conglomerate valued at over $3 billion. He is telling a woman who executes international acquisitions before her morning coffee that she does not understand complex economic ecosystems. The absolute comedy of my situation is almost intoxicating. For 5 years, I shrank myself down to fit into their tiny, pathetic world. I let Tasha mock my conservative clothes. I let Preston explain basic contract law to me at Thanksgiving dinners. I let Marcus take credit for the financial stability I secretly provided. I let a circle of fake drowning aristocrats treat me like a commoner because I valued their comfort over my own truth. I look at the 3 of them standing together. Marcus furious and embarrassed, Tasha sneering and draped in gold, Preston smug and patronizing. They are united in their contempt for me. They believe they hold all the power. They believe they have successfully bullied the quiet, unremarkable wife into submission. I do not scream. I do not cry. I do not defend my job or my intelligence. I let the silence stretch out, allowing their condescending words to settle deep into the foundation of the room. I want them to remember exactly what they said to me. I want these words burned into their memories for the rest of their lives. "Are you finished?" I ask. My voice is perfectly level, carrying an icy resonance that makes Preston's confident smile falter for a fraction of a second. Tasha scoffs, rolling her eyes. Call security, Preston. I am not going to stand here and argue with a bleeding payroll clerk. Have her escorted out through the freight elevator before the investors leave in disgust. Preston reaches into his pocket to retrieve his phone, keeping his eyes locked on me. You heard her, Nia. It is time to go. We are doing you a favor by not calling the police for trespassing. I shift my gaze from Preston to Marcus. Marcus is watching me with narrowed eyes, his jaw still tight with anger. He is waiting for me to break. He is waiting for me to lower my head, apologize for the scene, and scurry away into the night like the obedient wife I have always been. Instead, I lift my chin. I straighten my posture, ignoring the shooting pain in my ribs. I look directly past my husband, locking eyes with the managing partners of Sterling Capital, standing by the bar. I know these men. I know them very well. And more importantly, they know me. The senior managing partner of Sterling Capital, an older distinguished man named Harrison Sterling, is standing near the ice sculpture. I see the exact second his brain processes my face beneath the blood and bruising. He recognizes me from a highly classified closed-door boardroom meeting in Geneva 2 years ago. I see the blood drain from his face, leaving his skin the color of ash. He takes a shaky step forward, his mouth opening to address me by my proper title, ready to defer to the woman who secretly underwrites his entire firm. But before Harrison can utter a single syllable, Marcus steps directly into my line of sight, aggressively blocking my view of the investors. Marcus completely misreads the dynamic. He assumes I am looking at his wealthy bosses in a desperate, pathetic attempt to plead for help. He assumes I am trying to make a public spectacle to save my failing marriage. The absolute hubris radiating from my husband is staggering. He wants to end this quickly. He wants to decisively crush me in front of his peers, to prove he is a ruthless, uncompromising man who cannot be distracted by emotional baggage. Marcus turns his head and snaps his fingers at the blonde woman in the silver dress. She glides over to him, a smug, victorious smile plastered across her glossy lips. She retrieves a thick, heavy manila envelope from a leather briefcase sitting on a nearby mahogany console table. She hands it to Marcus, deliberately brushing her hand against his chest in a show of territorial dominance. Marcus takes the envelope and violently slaps it down onto the center of the massive marble coffee table sitting between us. The sharp smack of the heavy paper against the stone echoes through the dead silent room. I was going to wait until tomorrow morning to have Preston serve you with these at your little HR desk. Marcus sneers, his voice echoing with absolute disdain. I was going to let you heal from whatever pathetic fender bender you got yourself into, but since you decided to crash my celebration, bleed all over my floor, and embarrass me in front of the most important men in this city, we are doing this right now. He taps the thick stack of legal documents with his index finger. These are divorce papers, Nia. Preston expedited the filing 3 days ago. A collective gasp ripples through the crowd of onlookers. Firing a spouse in the middle of a high-society corporate mixer is brutal even by their cutthroat standards. But Marcus is basking in the cruelty. He puffs out his chest, completely energized by the audience watching him discard me. You and I are done, he announces, projecting his voice so everyone can hear his grand declaration of independence. I am ascending to the absolute elite tier of this city. I am closing a $15 million merger that will secure my legacy. I am outgrowing you, Nia. You are dead weight. You have zero ambition, zero vision, and zero class. You are perfectly content, living a mediocre, unremarkable life, and I refuse to let you drag me down to your pathetic level any longer. He proudly pulls the blonde woman against his side. She looks at me with eyes full of malicious pity. This is Chloe. Marcus says, his tone dripping with arrogant pride. Chloe is a vice president of public relations. She understands macroeconomics. She understands ambition. She is a woman who actually knows how to dress, how to carry herself, and how to stand beside a senior partner without looking like a terrified peasant. She is worthy of the life I am building. You are not. Chloe tilts her head, giving me a sickly, sweet, condescending pout. It is time to let a real woman take over the household, Nia, she says, her voice echoing the exact whining pitch I heard over the hospital recording. You should really go get those cuts checked out at a free clinic. Marcus ignores her comment and points a rigid finger directly at my face. Let me make the terms of this divorce perfectly clear to you right now, he commands. I am seizing the marital home. That townhouse is entirely in my name, paid for by my bonuses and my hard work. You have exactly 30 days to pack up your cheap clothes and vacate my property. Preston has drafted this settlement to be absolutely ironclad. You are entitled to absolutely nothing of my new fortune. No alimony, no equity, nothing. You did not contribute a single dime to my success, and you will not see a single penny of my wealth. Preston steps forward again, crossing his arms over his chest, looking incredibly proud of his legal handiwork. It is an airtight document. Nia Preston draws his lawyer persona in full effect. By signing it, you waive all rights to Marcus's current and future assets, including his impending partnership equity and the townhouse. I suggest you sign it immediately. If you try to fight us in court, I will personally bury you in legal fees until you are bankrupt and living on the street. Tasha laughs, a sharp, grating sound that cuts through the tension. Just sign the papers, you parasite. Tasha mocks, sipping her champagne. Take whatever loose change you have in your checking account and disappear. The Vanguard family is finally purging its weakest link. I stand perfectly still, absorbing the absolute mind-numbing stupidity radiating from the three of them. Marcus thinks he owns the townhouse. He does not know that the deed is held by a blind trust that I fully control and that I secretly paid off the entire mortgage 3 years ago just to relieve his financial stress. He thinks he is kicking me out of my own home. Preston thinks he has drafted an ironclad weapon to destroy me. He does not realize that his airtight legal document designed to completely separate Marcus's assets from mine has just legally shielded my $3 billion net worth from my husband forever. By forcing me to waive my rights to his pathetic savings account, Marcus has unwittingly signed a legally binding waiver to my entire global empire. Preston, the failing, incompetent lawyer, has just handed me the greatest legal victory of my life on a silver platter. I do not beg. I do not cry. I do not launch into a screaming match to defend my honor. I slowly walk forward. My bare, bloody feet leave faint red imprints on the pristine marble floor. The guests shrink back as I approach the coffee table. I reach down and pick up the heavy, solid gold Mont Blanc pen resting beside the legal documents. Marcus braces himself, his shoulders tense. He expects me to throw the pen at his face. He expects me to rip the papers to shreds and drop to my knees in hysterics. Instead, I casually flip the thick packet open to the final signature page. I lean over the table. The silk of my torn dress brushes against the cold stone. Without a single moment of hesitation, without reading a single line of Preston's worthless legal jargon, I press the gold nib to the paper. I sign my name with smooth, elegant, unbroken strokes. The scratching of the pen is the only sound in the massive penthouse. I sign the primary declaration. I sign the asset waiver. I sign the property forfeiture. I execute every single line they demand of me with absolute chilling precision. When I am finished, I place the gold pen gently back onto the marble. Marcus stares at me, completely thrown off balance. The victorious smirk vanishes from his face, replaced by a deep, unsettling confusion. He wanted a fight. He wanted to break me. My absolute icy compliance terrifies him more than any screaming match ever could. You signed it, Marcus whispers almost to himself, looking down at the fresh ink. I stand up straight, ignoring the sharp pain radiating through my broken ribs. Yes, Marcus, I reply, my voice smooth and perfectly serene. I signed it. You are legally entirely divested from me. You have protected your assets, and I have protected mine. I reach into the side pocket of the black leather portfolio I brought up from the SUV. My fingers grasp a single heavy sheet of premium watermarked paper. It is a document I had my wealth manager explicitly prepare and courier to my vehicle while I was leaving the hospital. I pull the document out. I hold it suspended in the air for a fraction of a second, letting the ambient light catch the expensive foil stamping at the top of the page. Then I casually, deliberately drop it onto the marble table right next to the freshly signed divorce decree. The heavy paper lands with a soft thud. Marcus's eyes automatically drop to look at it. Chloe leans over his shoulder, her brow furrowed in confusion. Preston steps closer, his lawyer instincts kicking in, trying to read the text upside down. At the very top of the page, printed in bold, embossed metallic lettering, is a massive corporate logo, Vanguard Holdings. It is the very investment fund that just injected the $15 million of capital into Marcus's impending merger. It is the silent apex financial juggernaut that essentially owns Sterling Capital outright. It is a fund I created and named as a private, cynical joke years ago, entirely mocking Tasha's delusion of a Vanguard family legacy. Marcus stares at the logo. His brain shorts out. He recognizes the emblem immediately. It has been stamped on every single term sheet, email, and contract he has obsessed over for the last 6 months. He reads the bold capitalized text centered directly beneath the logo. It is a formal, immediate withdrawal of all capital funding, citing a breach of executive morality clauses. And sitting at the very bottom of that corporate execution order, authorizing the complete and total financial demolition of his $15 million deal, is a signature. It is the exact same smooth, elegant, unbroken signature I just left on his divorce papers. Marcus traces the elegant loops of fresh ink on the divorce decree, his eyes darting frantically between my handwritten name and the embossed signature printed at the bottom of the Vanguard Holdings execution order. It takes several seconds for his alcohol-soaked, ego-driven brain to process the visual data resting on the marble table. I watch the gears grinding in his head, struggling to reconcile the dependent, unremarkable wife he has known for 5 years with the absolute financial juggernaut standing before him. The cognitive dissonance is too massive. His mind simply rejects the truth. But denial is a powerful, blinding narcotic. Marcus blinks rapidly, shaking his head as if trying to physically dislodge a persistent hallucination. He lets out a sharp, breathless laugh, looking around the room as if searching for someone to explain the joke to him. Before Marcus can formulate a coherent sentence, Preston pushes past him. The tall, bespoke-suited lawyer leans heavily over the coffee table, his eyes narrowing critically at the Vanguard Holdings document. As a corporate attorney, even a failing one, Preston recognizes the heavy watermark and the proprietary formatting of a top-tier institutional capital withdrawal notice. He knows the sheer devastating gravity of what that single sheet of paper represents. But Preston's arrogance is his fatal, inescapable flaw. He cannot fathom a universe where the bleeding barefoot HR clerk standing in front of him wields any measure of actual corporate authority. He constructs a reality that fits his narrow, prejudiced worldview, and he latches onto it with desperate ferocity. Preston scoffs a loud, ugly, theatrical sound that shatters the thick tension hovering over the penthouse. He snatches the heavy watermarked paper off the marble table and brandishes it in the air like a hard-won piece of criminal evidence. "You pathetic, desperate thief!" Preston spits out, his face flushing with a sudden rush of self-righteous indignation. He turns to the crowd of wealthy onlookers, holding the document high so everyone can see it. "Look at this," Preston announces, projecting his voice to ensure the investors by the bar can hear his brilliant legal deduction. "She stole this. This deranged woman actually broke into Marcus's home office, or perhaps hacked into a low-level administrative email server at her little HR job and printed out an internal corporate file just to stage a dramatic stunt." Preston steps closer to me, his chest puffed out, beating it metaphorically as he attempts to establish his absolute dominance over the situation. He points a manicured finger directly at my face. "You really thought you could waltz in here, forge a signature on a stolen internal memo, and scare us? You do not even understand the paperwork you are holding, Nia. You are so far out of your depth you are drowning." He adjusts his silk tie, practically vibrating with the thrill of his own perceived brilliance. Let me educate you, since you clearly lack the basic intellectual capacity to comprehend what is happening in this room. Preston drawls, his condescending tone echoing across the silent space. I personally drafted the preliminary compliance agreements for this exact merger. I know the intricate details of the Vanguard contract because I am the legal counsel who facilitated the initial escrow structuring. I negotiated the terms with Vanguard's frontline executive proxies. I know the people who run that fund. Preston takes another step forward, attempting to physically intimidate me with his height. You have just committed corporate espionage, grand larceny, and felony fraud by forging a signature on a proprietary financial instrument. I will personally see to it that federal prosecutors drag you out of your pathetic little cubicle in handcuffs. I will see you locked in a federal penitentiary for the next 20 years. You are entirely finished, Nia. The immediate relief that washes over Marcus is palpable. He eagerly buys into Preston's logical, comfortable explanation. Marcus sneers, his handsome face twisting into a mask of cruel mockery. He actually believes I am just a crazy, jealous ex-wife trying to ruin his night with a stack of fake stolen paperwork. I should have known you would stoop this low. Marcus laughs, shaking his head in feigned pity. You are so desperate to hold on to me that you resorted to stealing my office files to stage a fake corporate coup. You are completely pathetic, Nia. It is embarrassing to even look at you right now. Tasha chimes in from the sidelines, clapping her hands together in wicked delight. Oh, this is absolutely priceless, Tasha mocks, taking a long sip of her champagne. The little payroll clerk tries to play high society corporate raider and gets instantly exposed by a real lawyer. Call the police, Preston. Have this psychotic thief arrested right now. Chloe giggles, pressing her body tighter against Marcus's arm, staring at me with a sickeningly sweet pout. You really need psychiatric help, Naya, she whines. This is just sad. I stand completely unfazed, absorbing their mockery like a stone absorbing rain. I do not interrupt Preston's long, loud tirade. I let him dig his grave as deep as he possibly can. I want him to firmly establish his supposed expertise in front of the entire room. I glance past their mocking faces to the bar. Harrison Sterling, the senior managing partner of Sterling Capital, has not moved a single inch. Harrison is sweating profusely. He knows exactly who I am. He is watching the supreme chairwoman of Vanguard Holdings get insulted and threatened by a mediocre, failing boutique lawyer, and he is too absolutely terrified to intervene. I turn my attention back to Preston. He is still smirking, waiting for me to burst into tears and beg for mercy. My voice is soft, but it carries a razor-sharp edge that slices cleanly through their laughter. You claim you negotiated this deal with Vanguard, Preston, I say smoothly. You claim you know the executives who run the fund. Tell me, do you happen to recall the name of the chief executive officer of Vanguard Holdings? The man you supposedly reported to? Preston scoffs again, rolling his eyes at my challenge. Of course I do, he brags, loudly looking around the room to ensure his audience is paying attention. His name is Jonathan Croft. He and I have been on several highly confidential conference calls over the last quarter. We have a very solid professional rapport. I slowly reach into the pocket of my torn, blood-stained silk gown. I pull out my smartphone. It is a custom-engineered device built from matte black titanium and equipped with military-grade encryption software that is entirely untraceable. I tap the screen, bypassing the biometric security. Well, Preston, I reply, my tone dangerously calm. Since you and Jonathan are such close professional colleagues, we should probably get him on the line right now. It seems only fair that we ask the CEO of Vanguard Holdings to verify the authenticity of this stolen document. Marcus lets out an exasperated groan. Stop embarrassing yourself, Nia. Put the phone away and get out before we actually call the cops. Preston smirks, crossing his arms over his chest, utterly convinced that I am bluffing. Oh, please call him Preston, taunts, gesturing toward my phone. Let us all hear you try to fake a phone call to Jonathan Croft. This should be highly entertaining. I do not look at Preston. I do not look at Marcus. I lock my eyes on the illuminated screen of my phone tap, a single encrypted contact icon, and press the speakerphone button. The dial tone rings out sharp and loud, echoing off the marble floors and the high ceilings of the penthouse. One ring, two rings. On the third ring, the line connects. The audio is incredibly crisp, broadcasting flawlessly across the dead silent room. Good evening, Chairwoman. The deep, highly professional, and unmistakably authoritative voice of Jonathan Croft echoes through the penthouse. The voice is laced with absolute, unquestioning deference. The disbursement file is ready, and the withdrawal orders have been staged for your final authorization. The entire penthouse goes graveyard silent. The faint clinking of ice against crystal stops entirely. The hushed whispering from the wealthy guests halts as if the air has been sucked out of the room. Preston's smug, arrogant smile vanishes in an instant, wiped completely off his face and replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated terror. The color drains from his cheeks. His arms fall limply to his sides. He recognizes the voice. He knows exactly who is speaking on the other end of the line, and he knows exactly what title Jonathan Croft just used to address me. Marcus stares at the matte black phone resting in my bloody hand as if it is a live ticking explosive. His jaw drops open. His eyes dart wildly from the phone to the signed document on the table to my bruised face. I maintain my icy composure, refusing to let a single ounce of satisfaction show on my face. I speak directly into the microphone, my voice echoing with the crushing weight of a multi-billion-dollar empire. Jonathan, I say smoothly, I need you to confirm the immediate execution of the order I forwarded to your encrypted terminal 10 minutes ago. Yes, Chairwoman, Jonathan replies instantly, his voice echoing loudly for the entire room to hear. I have the document in front of me. You are authorizing the total and immediate withdrawal of the $15 million capital injection designated for the Sterling Capital merger. Marcus lets out a strangled, breathless gasp. He physically stumbles backward, bumping into the mahogany console table, his hands grasping the edge to keep himself from collapsing to the floor. I want the funds permanently frozen! Jonathan, I command, my eyes locking onto my husband's terrified face. The executive leadership of this merger has demonstrated a critical, irredeemable failure in morality and basic competence. The Vanguard Fund will not underwrite absolute liabilities. Understood, Chairwoman, Jonathan replies without a single second of hesitation. The funds have been permanently frozen. The capital has been pulled. The merger is officially terminated as of this exact minute. We will notify the Sterling Capital Board of your decision in the morning. Will there be anything else tonight? I look directly at Marcus, who is now hyperventilating, his chest heaving, as the reality of his total financial and professional destruction crashes down upon him. I shift my gaze to Preston, who looks like he is about to vomit on his expensive shoes. I look at Tasha, whose mouth is hanging wide open in silent, horrified disbelief. No, Jonathan, I reply, my voice dropping to a deadly quiet whisper. That will be all. You have executed the order perfectly. I reach down and tap the screen, ending the call. The sharp beep of the disconnected line rings out like a judge's gavel, sealing a final, inescapable verdict. The silence that follows is absolute. The reality of the situation settles over the Vanguard family like a suffocating, inescapable physical weight. The illusion is dead. The money is gone. And the woman they spent 5 years treating like dirt is holding the deed to their entire existence. I let the heavy, suffocating silence stretch out for a full minute. I want them to drown in it. I turn my body slowly, deliberately shifting my focus away from Marcus and directing my full attention to the tall, bespoke-suited lawyer standing paralyzed to his left. Preston looks as if he has been struck by lightning. His mouth hangs slightly open and a visible bead of cold sweat forms at his temple, tracking a slow path down the side of his perfectly manicured face. You were saying something about complex economic ecosystems, Preston. I say, my voice smooth and conversational, completely at odds with the violence of the situation. You were lecturing me about macro finance. You claimed you personally drafted the preliminary compliance agreements and negotiated the terms. I tilt my head, studying him like a fascinating insect pinned to a board. Tell me, counselor, did you actually read the documents you signed on behalf of your brother-in-law, or did you just skim the executive summary so you could rush off to the golf course? Preston swallows hard. His Adam apple bobs convulsively in his throat. He tries to speak, but only a dry, raspy sound escapes his lips. He clears his throat desperately, trying to summon the arrogant drawl he used to mock me just moments ago. I reviewed the contract. Preston stammers, his voice cracking. It was a standard institutional merger agreement. There was nothing out of the ordinary. It was a boilerplate capital injection escrow. I let out a soft, melodic laugh. The sound is entirely devoid of warmth. It echoes off the glass walls of the penthouse, sending a visible shiver down Preston's spine. Laziness. I knew you were too busy playing laziness. I knew you were too busy playing the role of a high-powered aristocratic lawyer to actually do the grueling, microscopic work of a first-year associate. So when Vanguard Holdings structured the terms of this specific $15 million capital injection, I personally instructed my legal team to bury a series of highly irregular, extremely predatory clauses deep within the fourth addendum of the escrow agreement. Preston's eyes widen. He takes a shaky step backward, his polished leather shoes slipping slightly on the marble floor. Let us review your brilliant legal work. I continue, taking a slow step toward him. In Section 4, Paragraph 7, under the heading of Executive Morality and Fiduciary Compliance, there is an immediate acceleration clause. It states that if the funding is pulled due to a breach of executive conduct which Jonathan Croft just officially executed, on the recorded line the receiving party is not only denied the capital, but is immediately liable for a punitive breach of contract fee equivalent to 20% of the total projected merger value. I pause, letting the math settle into his panicking brain. 20% of $15 million is $3 million. That is a penalty fee due immediately upon termination. Marcus lets out a choked gasp. $3 million, he whispers, his voice trembling with raw panic. Preston, what is she talking about? What did you make me sign? Preston ignores Marcus. He is staring at me, his chest heaving, his hands shaking at his sides. That penalty would fall on the corporate entity. Preston argues, his lawyer instincts blindly fighting for survival. It would fall on Sterling Capital. Marcus is just an operating partner. He is shielded by corporate liability. I smile. It is a terrifying, predatory smile. You would be absolutely correct, Preston, if you had not signed the personal guarantor addendum buried on page 87. The color drains entirely from Preston's face. He looks like a man who has just stepped off a cliff and is waiting to hit the ground. Yes, I say softly, watching the realization crush the life out of him. The personal guarantor addendum, a clause explicitly stating that the lead negotiating executive, which is Marcus, and the primary legal counsel of record, which is you, Preston Cross, collateralize the penalty fee with your own personal assets. It is a joint and several liability clause. You literally signed away your own personal net worth and Marcus's entire financial future to secure a deal that I exclusively controlled. Tasha lets out a piercing shriek. She lunges forward, grabbing Preston by the lapels of his expensive gray suit. Tell me she is lying, Tasha screams, shaking him violently. Tell me you did not put us on the hook for $3 million. Tell me you read the contract, Preston. Preston cannot look at his wife. He stares at the floor, his breathing shallow and rapid. I did not see it. He whispers, his arrogant drawl completely gone, replaced by the pathetic whimper of a broken man. The paperwork was 600 pages long. Vanguard is the most prestigious fund in the world. They do not use predatory clauses. I thought it was just standard indemnity language. I just checked the signature boxes. You outsourced the review to a junior paralegal because you had a wine tasting to attend, I state, citing the exact intelligence my private investigators had gathered on him weeks ago. You stamped your firm's seal on a document that essentially transferred ownership of your entire life directly to me. A first-year law student would have spotted the trap, Preston. But your ego was so massive, you simply assumed you were playing in a league you actually belonged in. You thought you were managing macro finance. In reality, you were just signing your own financial death warrant. Marcus looks like he is going to faint. He stumbles toward Preston, grabbing him by the shoulder and ripping him away from Tasha. "You idiot!" Marcus roars, spittle flying from his lips. "You told me it was airtight. You told me it was the cleanest contract you had ever seen. You just bankrupted me. You just ruined my life." "I did not know," Preston shouts back, trying to push Marcus away. "How could I know the woman I was making fun of at Thanksgiving dinner was the supreme chairwoman of the entire fund? It was a blind trust. The ownership was buried behind 12 layers of corporate shielding. It was buried behind those layers to protect you from your own staggering incompetence." I interrupt, my voice cutting through their pathetic squabbling. "I spent 5 years shielding this family from reality. I paid off Tasha's $400,000 in consumer debt using a ghost corporation so she could keep wearing those cheap sequined gowns and pretending to be old money. I paid the mortgage on this penthouse so Marcus could feel like a titan of industry. I kept the training wheels on your entire pathetic existence. And the very second I took my hands off the wheel, you rode yourselves straight off a cliff." Tasha drops to her knees on the Persian rug. She covers her face with her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Her heavy gold jewelry clinks together as she shakes. The illusion of her aristocratic lineage has been brutally publicly slaughtered. She knows that the debt collectors will return by morning, and this time, her invisible benefactor will not be there to save her. Preston looks around the room, his eyes wild and desperate. He looks at the wealthy investors standing by the bar, the men he was desperately trying to impress just 20 minutes ago. Harrison Sterling steps forward, his face etched with cold, calculating disgust. "You are entirely finished in this city," Preston Harrison says, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Your firm is blacklisted as of this exact moment. I will personally ensure that every managing partner on the Eastern Seaboard knows that you committed gross legal malpractice and failed basic due diligence. You will be disbarred before the end of the fiscal quarter." Harrison turns his cold gaze to Marcus. "And you, Marcus, you are terminated. Effective immediately. You're a massive liability. Do not ever step foot inside Sterling Capital again. We will be suing you personally for the catastrophic failure of this merger." Marcus collapses onto the plush velvet sofa, burying his head in his hands. Chloe, the blonde vice president of public relations, who was clinging to his arm just moments ago, slowly backs away from him. She looks at the ruined, bankrupt man crying on the sofa, then looks at me standing tall and victorious in my blood-stained gown. She does not say a word. She simply turns on her silver heels and practically runs toward the elevator bank, abandoning Marcus the exact second his wealth evaporates. I look down at the men who thought they could casually discard me. They are broken, sobbing, and completely destroyed by their own blind arrogance. The absolute intellectual humiliation is complete. Preston thought he was the smartest man in the room. He thought I was just a lowly clerk. Now he knows that I engineered his total destruction using nothing but his own colossal ego against him. I did not just beat him, I exposed him as a total irreversible fraud. The silence in the penthouse is absolute and heavy. Preston is hyperventilating in the corner. Marcus is sobbing on the velvet sofa. And then there is Chloe, the blonde vice president of public relations, who was clinging to my husband just moments ago, is now slowly and desperately inching her way backward. She is trying to slip through the crowd of paralyzed investors. She wants to reach the brass elevator doors before my attention turns to her. She thinks she can just quietly exit this nightmare and go back to her luxury condo as if nothing happened. She thinks she is merely a bystander in this financial slaughter. "Going somewhere so soon, Chloe?" I ask. My voice is not loud, but it slices through the dead air of the room like a freshly sharpened surgical scalpel. Chloe freezes instantly. Her silver stiletto heel is suspended an inch above the marble floor. The wealthy guests standing around her immediately step back, forming a wide, empty circle that leaves her completely exposed and trapped under the glare of the crystal chandeliers. She slowly turns around to face me. Her perfectly contoured face is entirely devoid of color. She tries to maintain her haughty, sophisticated persona, but her glossy lips are trembling uncontrollably. She looks at the exit, then she looks back at me, finally realizing that she is locked in a room with the woman who just vaporized her boyfriend's entire existence with a single phone call. I take a slow, measured step away from the ruined lawyers and close the distance toward her. I want every single person in this penthouse to witness the absolute destruction of the woman who giggled into a phone receiver while my husband casually ordered my death. You thought you were so incredibly clever, I say, my bare feet making no sound on the imported rugs. You thought you had found yourself a golden ticket, a handsome, wealthy senior partner who was finally ready to ditch his boring, dead-weight wife. You thought you were stepping effortlessly into a pre-built empire. Chloe swallows hard. She crosses her arms tightly over her chest, a useless, instinctive attempt to shield herself from my gaze. I do not know what you are talking about. She stammers, her voice high and breathless. I just work with Marcus. We just started seeing each other a few weeks ago. I did not know anything about your money or your company. I am entirely innocent in this. I let out a low, echoing laugh that makes several of the nearby guests physically flinch. Just started seeing each other, I repeat, tasting the absolute absurdity of her lie. Please, Chloe, do not insult my intelligence. It is deeply offensive. I have known about you for exactly 6 months. Marcus jerks his head up from his hands. He stares at me from the sofa, his red-rimmed eyes wide with fresh, unimaginable panic. 6 months, he whispers to himself. Yes, Marcus, 6 months, I confirm, keeping my gaze locked entirely on his mistress. I knew about the romantic weekend trips to Aspen that you charged to your corporate expense account. I knew about the vintage champagne you ordered to the room. I knew about the diamond tennis bracelet you bought her for her birthday, the one you cowardly hid in the bottom pocket of your golf bag in our garage. I even knew about the prepaid burner phone you kept locked in the glove compartment of your car. I take another step toward Chloe, backing her closer to the floor-to-ceiling windows. You both thought you were running a flawless, covert operation, I continue. You thought you were outsmarting a naive, uneducated housewife. You had absolutely no idea that you were living inside a digital surveillance net operated by a woman who owns a multi-billion-dollar technology conglomerate. I read every single one of your text messages before you even hit send. I listened to your voicemails. I tracked your GPS coordinates. I knew exactly what you were planning to do to me. Chloe's face turns a sickening ashen shade of gray. She looks at Marcus, a sudden horrifying realization dawning in her eyes. But she does not fully understand the true depths of the trap I have set for her. She still foolishly believes she can just walk away from this relationship, cut her losses, and salvage her own lucrative career. I am not a part of this. Chloe says, her voice rising in a desperate, frantic pitch. I am just a collateral victim here. Marcus lied to me. He told me he was entirely self-made. He told me he owned this $8 million penthouse. I am leaving him right now. You can have him back. I resign from this entire situation. She turns abruptly to make a final desperate break for the elevator, but my next words stop her heart from beating entirely. You cannot resign from a legally binding equity partnership, Chloe, I state smoothly. She freezes as if struck by a physical blow. Her silver heels lock against the floor. She turns her head back toward me slowly, her eyes wide with a brand new, highly distinct flavor of terror. What are you talking about? She breathes out, her voice barely a whisper. I walk over to the marble coffee table and casually tap the thick stack of divorce papers resting next to the Vanguard execution order. I look at her with absolute, unfiltered, predatory satisfaction. Did you really think it was a random corporate coincidence that Vanguard Holdings suddenly demanded a secondary executive guarantor to secure the final tranche of that $15 million capital injection? I ask her, letting the question hang heavily in the air. Did you think it was just a stroke of extraordinary luck when Marcus offered you the exclusive opportunity to buy into his senior partnership by leveraging your own personal assets? Marcus lets out a pathetic, strangled groan from the sofa. He drops his head between his knees, violently pulling at his own hair, completely unable to watch what is about to happen to the woman he claimed to love. You are the vice president of public relations at a competing firm, Chloe, I explained to the silent, horrified room. You make a very comfortable living. You own a luxury condo in the historic district. You have a robust stock portfolio and a highly padded retirement account. You thought you were an independent, savvy businesswoman. So when Marcus came to you 3 months ago, desperate and sweating, begging you to help him secure the final piece of funding for this merger, he asked you to co-sign the escrow agreement as an equity partner. He promised you a massive return on investment once the deal closed. He promised you would rule this city together. Chloe begins to shake violently. She looks at Marcus, her perfectly manicured hands curling into tight, white-knuckled fists. Tell me she is lying, Marcus. Chloe demands, her voice cracking under the immense weight of her panic. Tell me you did not put my legal name on that specific addendum. Tell me you did not cross-collateralize my assets. Marcus does not answer her. He just sobs quietly into his hands, a broken, pathetic shell of a man. He absolutely put your name on it. I confirm, savoring the taste of every single syllable. I made sure he did. I explicitly instructed my fund managers to aggressively reject his initial solo application. I knew he was staggeringly arrogant, but I also knew he lacked the liquid capital to secure a deal of this magnitude on his own. I knew he would panic when the deadline approached. And I knew exactly who he would turn to for a financial lifeline. He turned to the ambitious, greedy mistress, who desperately wanted to share his stolen throne. I take one final step toward her, dropping my voice to a lethal, quiet register. I engineered this entire $15 million merger specifically to gather every single asset you and Marcus own and put them into one convenient, highly flammable basket. Chloe's mouth falls open. She stumbles backward until her bare shoulders hit the sleek, cold glass of the balcony window. That penalty clause Preston was too spectacularly lazy to read. I continue, pointing at the terrified lawyer, who is still hyperventilating near the bar. The $3 million breach of contract fee. It does not just apply to Marcus and Preston. As the secondary equity guarantor of record, your personal assets are fully cross-collateralized. Vanguard Holdings will be legally seizing your luxury condo by the end of the week. We will be ruthlessly liquidating your stock portfolio. We will be draining your retirement accounts to satisfy the corporate debt. You wanted to build a beautiful life with my husband, Chloe. Congratulations! You now share his absolute, inescapable financial ruin. The silence in the penthouse is so profound, I can actually hear the hum of the city traffic 40 floors below us. The high society guests are completely paralyzed, witnessing a level of calculated vengeance that completely defies their comprehension. I did not just catch my husband cheating. I built a multi-million-dollar financial guillotine, waited 6 months for him and his mistress to willingly put their own necks inside it, and then I dropped the heavy steel blade while they were sipping my expensive champagne. Chloe finally snaps. The brutal reality of her total destruction shatters her polished, arrogant facade into a million jagged pieces. She is not just losing her wealthy boyfriend tonight. She is losing her home, her entire life savings, and her future. She has been completely liquidated by the bleeding woman she openly mocked over a hospital phone line just a few hours ago. She lets out a guttural, furious, animalistic scream that tears through the elegant room. She charges across the Persian rug, launching herself at the plush velvet sofa where Marcus is cowering in shame. You lying piece of garbage, Chloe shrieks, her voice raw and completely hysterical. She grabs Marcus by the lapels of his midnight blue velvet smoking jacket and hauls him upward with a surprising burst of adrenaline-fueled strength. Marcus tries to raise his arms to shield his face, but he is far too slow and too broken to properly defend himself. Chloe raises her right hand and slaps him directly across the face with everything she has. The sharp, violent crack of her palm striking his cheek echoes off the marble walls like a gunshot. The extreme force of the blow snaps Marcus's head violently to the side, leaving a bright red stinging handprint blossoming across his skin. "You told me you were a titan!" Chloe screams, tears of pure, unadulterated rage streaming down her perfectly contoured face, completely ruining her expensive makeup. "You told me you owned this world. You told me she was just a pathetic nobody tying you down and holding you back. You used my money. You put my home on the line for a deal secretly controlled by your own wife. You are nothing but a parasite," Marcus whimpers, holding his stinging cheek with a trembling hand. "Chloe, please." I did not know, he begs pathetically, tears streaming down his face. "I swear to God I did not know who she really was." She slaps him again, even harder this time. Her heavy diamond ring catches his lip. A bright drop of crimson blood appears at the corner of Marcus's mouth, mirroring the blood that stains my own face. "You are nothing," Chloe spits at him. Her voice filled with a venom so toxic it makes the surrounding corporate investors physically flinch. "You are a complete, utter fraud. You lived on her money. You slept in her house. You bought my expensive jewelry with her hidden charity. You have ruined my entire life just to stroke your own pathetic ego." Chloe shoves him backward with extreme violence. Marcus tumbles awkwardly over the armrest of the velvet sofa and crashes onto the hard marble floor in a pathetic, tangled heap of limbs. He scrambles weakly to his knees, looking up at his furious mistress with absolute hollow despair. Chloe does not give him another glance. She turns her furious, tear-stained face toward me. She desperately wants to scream at me. She wants to blame me for her total destruction. But when she looks deep into my eyes, she sees the cold, dead emptiness of a woman who survived a horrific car crash and a callous death sentence in the exact same night. She sees that I have absolutely zero mercy left in my soul, and that if she pushes me, I will completely erase whatever tiny fragments of her life still remain. Chloe forcefully swallows her scream. She grabs her designer clutch from the mahogany console table, keeping her terrified eyes fixed firmly on the floor, and practically sprints toward the elevator bank. She jabs the brass call button frantically, her chest heaving with panic. When the heavy doors finally slide open, she throws herself inside the cabin and disappears from my penthouse forever, leaving her former lover bleeding and weeping on the floor like a discarded piece of trash. I look down at Marcus, the great, powerful provider, the arrogant mastermind who thought he could casually throw me away and upgrade his life with a younger model. He is on his hands and knees, stripped entirely of his fake wealth, his beautiful mistress, his prestigious job, and his fragile dignity. The internal conflict of his perfect little world has violently exploded outward, leaving him with absolutely nothing but the clothes on his back and a massive debt he can never repay. The execution is flawless. The basket of debt has snapped permanently shut around them, and I am the only one holding the key. The brass doors of the elevator slide shut, cutting off the frantic clicking of Chloe's silver heels. The metallic clack is the final nail in the coffin of Marcus's pathetic romance. He remains on the floor, surrounded by the shattered glass of a dropped martini and the fading echoes of his mistress's fury. The wealthy investors, the elite socialites, and the sycophants who were toasting his brilliance just an hour ago are now actively backing away. They look at Marcus not with pity, but with the cold, calculating detachment of wolves recognizing a wounded, dying animal. I stand above him, my bare, blood-stained feet planted firmly on the imported Persian rug. I do not offer him a hand. I do not offer him a single shred of sympathy. I simply look down at the man who thought my life was worth less than a standard hospital bill. Marcus slowly lifts his heavy head. His perfectly styled hair is completely disheveled. The bright red handprint from Chloe's brutal slap pulses angrily on his cheek, a highly visible physical manifestation of his spectacular failure. He looks around the massive, opulent penthouse, his eyes darting frantically across the vaulted ceilings, the custom-curated artwork, and the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering downtown city skyline. He is desperately searching for an anchor. He is looking for something, anything to tether him to the grand illusion of his own success. "You ruined the merger!" Marcus gasps out his voice, a hoarse, ragged whisper that barely carries over the silence of the room. He struggles to his feet, his knees trembling slightly as he attempts to regain some microscopic fraction of his shattered dignity. "You drove Chloe away. You humiliated me in front of Harrison Sterling and the entire board of directors." He straightens his midnight blue velvet smoking jacket, his hands shaking violently as he grips the lapels. "But you cannot take this away from me. This is my home. I earned this life. The firm leased this penthouse for me because I am a top producer. The luxury cars parked in the private executive basement, the vintage Aston Martin, the brand new Porsche, they belong to me. You might be the chairwoman of some massive technology fund, Nia, but you cannot just strip a man of his personal property because you are angry about a divorce. I am still a senior corporate executive. I still have tangible assets. I will bounce back from this setback. I will hire real ruthless lawyers, and I will bury you in endless litigation if you try to touch my physical property." He is panting now, his chest heaving with a sudden, desperate burst of false bravado. He is clinging to the leather sofas, the crystal chandeliers, and the keys to his luxury garage like a drowning man clutching a rotting piece of driftwood. He actually believes the physical soundproof walls of this penthouse offer him solid protection from the financial hurricane I have just unleashed upon him. I let out a slow, deeply amused sigh. The sound makes him physically flinch. "You really do not pay attention to the fundamental details, Marcus." I state, my tone laced with absolute terrifying clinical precision. "You operate entirely on blind assumption and unchecked ego. You actually assumed Sterling Capital leased this $8 million penthouse for you out of the goodness of their corporate hearts. You assumed those luxury exotic vehicles sitting in the private executive garage downstairs were performance bonuses, rewarding your mediocre negotiation skills." I shake my head slowly, letting the crushing weight of impending reality bear down on him. "Sterling Capital did not buy those assets for you, Marcus. Vanguard Holdings financed them. I financed them." I point a steady, unyielding finger at the imported Italian marble floor beneath his expensive polished dress shoes. "This entire penthouse, the custom imported furnishings, the curated modern artwork, and every single high-performance vehicle sitting in that basement garage are legally registered under the Vanguard High-Risk Collateral Portfolio. They were specifically structured as advanced corporate leverage against the successful completion of the $15 million merger. It was a carefully designed corporate honey trap, created exclusively for a man with an insatiable, reckless appetite for things he could not actually afford." Marcus stares at me, his eyes widening as the remaining blood rushes entirely out of his face. He opens his mouth to speak, but his vocal cords are paralyzed. I walk back over to the marble coffee table and pick up the thick, heavy manila envelope containing the divorce papers. I hold the legal packet high up in the air, letting the soft, warm light of the crystal chandelier illuminate the fresh, dark ink of my signature. "You were so incredibly eager to get rid of me tonight," I continue, my voice echoing through the room with a lethal rhythmic cadence. "You could not even wait until morning. You had to throw these legal documents in my face right here in front of your wealthy peers and your ambitious mistress to proudly prove what a ruthless, unattached titan of industry you are. You wanted to discard me like a piece of broken machinery, but you spectacularly failed to read the fine print of your own corporate financing agreement." I take a step closer to him, holding the divorce decree like a weapon. In Section 8 of the Vanguard Collateral Addendum, there is a strict, entirely non-negotiable lifestyle stability clause. It explicitly mandates that the primary executive guarantor, which is you, must maintain their current marital and legal status for the entire duration of the financial escrow period. It is a highly standard morality and risk assessment protocol designed to ensure the principal operator is not actively engaged in reckless, destabilizing personal behavior that could jeopardize the firm's invested capital. I drop the divorce papers back onto the marble table. The sharp, resounding smack makes Marcus jump. By serving me with expedited divorce papers, and by publicly declaring your absolute intent to sever our marital assets in front of Vanguard's silent ownership, you have willfully and aggressively violated the Lifestyle Stability Clause. You triggered an immediate, irreversible default on the entire collateral agreement. The contract is officially and permanently voided as of the exact second I signed my name to your pathetic decree. I stepped directly into his personal space, backing him against the hard edge of the velvet sofa. You do not own this penthouse, Marcus. You do not own the vintage Aston Martin. You do not own the Porsche. You do not even own the designer velvet jacket you are currently sweating through. You are nothing but a glorified, subsidized tenant who just intentionally violated his lease agreement on a multi-million-dollar scale. Because of your desperate need to look powerful for your mistress, you have legally forfeited absolutely everything to Vanguard Holdings. Marcus's legs finally give out completely. He collapses backward onto the sofa, his mouth hanging wide open in silent, suffocating horror. He cannot breathe. The guests in the room remain completely motionless, collectively holding their breath as they watch a man being methodically, surgically erased from the upper echelon of high society. I do not look at the guests. I do not care about their shock. I reach into the pocket of my torn, blood-stained silk gown and retrieve my encrypted black smartphone. I do not need to dial a number. Vance, my towering head of security, has been listening to the entire exchange from the subterranean parking level through an open secure channel connected directly to my earpiece. Vance, I say, speaking clearly and authoritatively into the device. The primary executive guarantor is in critical, irredeemable default. Initiate the immediate asset seizure protocols. I want the extraction and recovery teams deployed right now. Lock down the underground executive garage. Immobilize the Aston Martin and the Porsche. Deactivate his corporate keycards and restrict all building access effective immediately. I want this entire property legally secured by Vanguard security personnel before midnight. Copy that. Chairwoman Vance's deep, rumbling voice replies through the speakerphone loud enough for Marcus to hear his final doom approaching. The garage is locked down. The extraction teams are entering the lobby elevators now. I slide the phone back into my pocket and look down at the trembling, broken shell of a man I used to call my husband. His face is buried deep in his hands, his broad shoulders shaking with violent, silent sobs. The brutal reality of his absolute zero net worth has finally crushed his fragile, arrogant spine. He wanted to pull the plug on my life support. Now I have pulled the plug on his entire reality. You have exactly 10 minutes to exit my property, Marcus. I command, my voice entirely devoid of warmth, mercy, or hesitation. You will leave the keys to the exotic vehicles on the kitchen island. You will leave the corporate platinum credit cards on the mahogany console table. You will walk out of those brass elevator doors with absolutely nothing but the clothes on your back. If you attempt to take a single designer watch, a single bottle of vintage scotch, or a single piece of artwork that belongs to my firm, I will have Vance drag you out into the freezing street by your hair, and I will press felony theft charges against you before the sun comes up. Get out of my house. The absolute silence that follows my command is broken by the sound of rapid, ragged breathing. It is not coming from Marcus. It is coming from Preston. The tall, bespoke-suited corporate lawyer is standing a few feet away, his chest heaving as if he has just run a marathon. He is staring at Harrison Sterling, the senior managing partner of Sterling Capital, who is glaring back at him with a look of pure, unadulterated professional execution. Preston knows exactly what Harrison meant when he promised to blacklist his firm. He knows that by tomorrow morning his legal career will be entirely vaporized. The crushing weight of the $3 million penalty fee is already suffocating him. But the loss of his prestigious law license is the final fatal blow to his massive ego. Preston looks at Marcus, who is still weeping pathetically on the velvet sofa. Then he looks at me. I see the exact moment the primitive survivalist instinct overrides his highly curated aristocratic persona. He is a cornered, desperate animal, and like all desperate animals, he is perfectly willing to chew off his own leg to escape the trap. In this case, the leg he is about to chew off belongs to his brother-in-law. "Wait!" Preston shouts, his voice cracking with a high-pitched, frantic desperation. He raises both of his hands in the air, palms facing outward, stepping away from Marcus, as if my husband is suddenly radioactive. "Chairwoman, please, you have to listen to me." "Harrison, wait. I am a victim in this situation. I was completely manipulated." A collective murmur ripples through the crowd of wealthy investors. They watch in grim fascination as the sophisticated lawyer publicly abandons his family loyalty to save his own skin. Marcus jerks his head up from his hands, his bloodshot eyes widening in absolute disbelief. He stares at his brother-in-law, the man who confidently guided him into this financial slaughterhouse, now actively backing away from him. "I did not know the documents were forged," Preston yells, pointing an accusing, trembling finger directly at Marcus. "I did not know the Vanguard escrow protocols were being violated. He lied to me. Marcus explicitly forced me to falsify those financial statements." Marcus lets out a choked gasp. He pushes himself up from the sofa, his face twisting into a mask of pure, unfiltered betrayal. "Preston, what the hell are you doing?" Marcus demands, his voice raw and broken. "I am telling the truth to save my firm from your psychotic ambition," Preston screams back, completely abandoning any pretense of familial solidarity. He turns his frantic gaze back to me, pleading with his eyes. "Chairwoman, I swear to you I was acting under extreme duress. Marcus came to me 3 months ago. He told me he lacked the liquid capital to clear the preliminary background checks for the Sterling merger. He demanded that I doctor his financial portfolios. He explicitly ordered me to artificially inflate his asset valuations to trick the Vanguard auditors." "That is a complete lie," Marcus roars, staggering forward. The remaining guests shrink back, horrified by the rapid, violent dissolution of the Vanguard family. "It is the absolute truth." Preston shrieks, his perfectly styled hair now falling wildly across his sweaty forehead. "He threatened me. He told me that if I did not sign off on the fake W-2 forms and the inflated property deeds, he would pull the entire corporate retainer from my boutique firm. My practice was already struggling. I needed the legal fees from this merger to keep my office doors open. He held my livelihood hostage. He coerced me into committing corporate fraud." Preston drops to his knees on the Persian rug right in front of the marble coffee table. He looks up at me, clasping his hands together like a beggar pleading for his life. "I will turn state's evidence." Chairwoman Preston begs, tears of pure terror streaming down his face. "I will give your legal team everything. I have copies of the doctored spreadsheets. I have the emails where he instructed me to hide his massive debts. I will testify against him in federal court. Just please, I beg of you, do not seize my personal assets. Do not let Harrison strip my law license. I will hand you Marcus on a silver platter." The sheer staggering cowardice of his betrayal hangs heavy in the penthouse air. He is fully prepared to send his own brother-in-law to a federal penitentiary for a decade just to spare himself the embarrassment of bankruptcy. Marcus lets out a primal, furious roar. He charges across the clearing, his fists clenched tight. "You spineless, backstabbing rat!" Marcus shouts, closing the distance between them. "You came to me with the idea. You told me cooking the books was standard industry practice. You said you knew how to bypass the Vanguard compliance algorithms because you desperately needed the closing bonus to pay off your own massive business loans. You ruined me." Before Marcus can reach Preston, another figure launches into the center of the room. Tasha. She has been standing frozen in shock, watching the two men she anchored her entire fake aristocratic identity to tear each other apart like starving dogs. The illusion of her sophisticated wealthy lineage is not just dead, it is being publicly mutilated in front of the exact high society crowd she spent years trying to impress. She realizes that her white, educated, sophisticated husband is happily throwing her own flesh and blood into a burning fire just to save his own tailored suit. Tasha lets out a piercing, hysterical scream. She lunges forward, her custom sequined gown catching the light as she intercepts Preston before Marcus can reach him. "How dare you!" Tasha shrieks, grabbing Preston by the shoulders and violently shaking him. "You married into this family. You promised to elevate us. You promised me wealth and status, and now you are selling my brother to the federal government to save your own pathetic, failing law firm." Preston scrambles backward, trying to break free from his wife's frantic grip. He shoves her hands away, his face contorting with absolute vicious resentment. He turns his panic into pure malice, directing all of his humiliation squarely at Tasha. "Elevate you," Preston screams back, his voice cracking with hysterical rage. "Look at you. You are a walking, talking debt collection notice. You are completely toxic. I married a total fraud. You do not have an ounce of old money in your veins. You are nothing but cheap fake gold and maxed out credit cards. You drained my bank accounts to fund your pathetic high society delusions, and now you are dragging me down into poverty with you. I wish I had never met you or your degenerate brother." The insult hits Tasha like a physical shockwave. Her eyes widen, filling with an unhinged, violent madness. The last remaining thread of her sanity snaps completely. Tasha lets out a guttural, terrifying screech. She lunges directly at Preston's face, her heavily manicured hands adorned with expensive acrylic nails paid for by my secret charity rake violently across his cheek. Preston lets out a sharp yell of pain as deep, bloody scratches appear across his pale skin. He stumbles backward, completely losing his balance. Tasha does not stop. She tackles him, driving her full body weight into his chest. They crash hard onto the imported marble floor. The impact sends a shockwave through the room. Tasha is screaming wildly, tearing at his expensive gray suit, ripping his silk tie from his neck, and striking him with her heavy gold bracelets. "Get off me, you psycho!" Preston shouts, raising his arms to shield his bleeding face. He kicks out blindly, his polished leather shoe connecting with Tasha's stomach, forcefully shoving her off him. Tasha tumbles backward, hitting the edge of the heavy marble coffee table. The massive stack of signed divorce papers scatters wildly across the floor, fluttering through the air like dead leaves. Seeing his sister shoved to the ground pushes Marcus completely over the edge. The man who just lost his job, his mistress, and his entire fortune finally snaps. Marcus lets out a furious battle cry and dives onto Preston. The two men collide with devastating force. Marcus drives his fist directly into Preston's jaw. The sickening crack of bone hitting bone echoes through the penthouse. Preston retaliates wildly, swinging his fists, catching Marcus in the eye. They roll across the Persian rug, grabbing, punching, and tearing at each other like feral, uneducated animals fighting over a scrap of meat in a gutter. Tasha recovers from her fall and throws herself back into the chaotic fray. She grabs a handful of Preston's perfectly styled hair and yanks his head backward, screaming obscenities that completely betray her carefully practiced aristocratic vocabulary. Preston blindly swings an elbow backward, catching Tasha in the mouth. Her lip splits open, spilling bright red blood down her chin, but she refuses to let go. The three of them become a violent, tangled mass of torn, velvet-ripped silk and bleeding faces thrashing wildly in the dead center of the $8 million penthouse. They crash into a side table, sending a towering, expensive crystal vase shattering into 1,000 pieces across the floor. The elite crowd of investors, socialites, and corporate executives are paralyzed with absolute, unadulterated horror. They press themselves tightly against the glass walls, and the bar desperately trying to avoid the flying glass and the spray of blood. They are watching the so-called Vanguard family, the proud lineage of visionaries, physically beat each other to death over the pathetic, shattered remnants of their own greed. I do not move a single inch. I stand perfectly still, my bare feet planted firmly on the floor. I watch the spectacle unfold with cold, detached precision. The contrast is absolutely poetic. I am the woman they called a feral street beggar just 20 minutes ago, standing tall, quiet, and completely composed in my blood-soaked gown. They are the sophisticated upper-class elites, and they are currently rolling around on the floor, destroying each other in a frantic, undignified brawl. I do not have to lift a single finger to ruin them. Their own toxic parasitic nature is doing all the heavy lifting for me. As Marcus lands another brutal punch on Preston's bleeding nose, the heavy brass doors of the private elevator slide open with a soft melodic chime. Vance, my towering head of security, steps out into the foyer. He is flanked by four massive, unsmiling security contractors dressed in tactical black suits. They look past the terrified, cowering guests and lock their eyes onto the violent, bloody brawl taking place on the ruined Persian rug. Vance looks at the three pathetic figures tearing each other apart. Then he looks at me silently, waiting for his orders. I gaze down at my husband, his sister, and her lawyer, all currently bleeding and gasping for air on the floor of my property. I take a deep, slow breath, savoring the absolute intoxicating silence of my victory. Take out the trash, Vance, I command softly. All of it. Vance nods sharply, his granite expression completely unchanged by the absolute chaos that has just unfolded on the marble floor. He raises two fingers in a silent tactical command. The four massive security contractors standing behind him move with terrifying, practiced efficiency. They step into the center of the ruined Persian rug and effortlessly separate the thrashing, bleeding trio. They do not use excessive force because they do not need to. The sheer overwhelming physical presence of these highly trained professionals is more than enough to completely pacify the brawling family. One contractor grabs Marcus by the back of his torn velvet collar, hauling him roughly to his feet. Marcus is completely limp, his legs offering zero resistance. Another contractor pulls Preston up, pinning the lawyer's arms securely behind his back, while a third stands directly over Tasha, ensuring she does not launch another hysterical, unhinged attack. They look unbelievably pathetic. Their expensive, carefully chosen designer clothes are ripped at the seams and stained with fresh blood. They are panting, sweating profusely, and completely stripped of every single ounce of their curated aristocratic dignity. I watch them being corralled toward the foyer, but then I raise my hand. Hold, I command softly. My voice cuts easily through their heavy, ragged breathing. We have one final piece of corporate housekeeping to address before you are permanently evicted from my property. Vance signals his men to stop. They hold the three broken figures firmly in place under the bright glare of the crystal chandeliers. Marcus slowly lifts his head, his swollen, bruised eye blinking rapidly. He watches my hand reach back into the black leather portfolio resting on the console table, and I can actually see his pupils dilate with a fresh, horrifying surge of terror. He genuinely believed I had already taken absolutely everything. He thought he had finally reached the absolute rocky bottom of this financial abyss. He is spectacularly wrong. I pull out a single thick stack of heavily redacted banking statements. The paper is crisp and official, carrying the embossed seal of a premier national bank. I hold the documents loosely in my hand, letting the heavy silence build until it is almost suffocating. You were incredibly desperate 3 months ago, Marcus. I begin walking slowly toward him, my bare feet leaving faint red traces on the floor. You needed to secure your portion of the matching liquid capital to initiate the escrow sequence for the Sterling merger. Even after coercing Chloe into putting her luxury condo on the line, and even after forcing Preston to fraudulently inflate your personal asset valuations, you were still short by exactly $2.5 million. The Vanguard compliance algorithms kept aggressively rejecting your application due to a lack of tangible collateral. You were entirely out of options, out of favors, and rapidly running out of time. I stopped just a few feet away from him, locking my eyes onto his terrified, bleeding face. So you did what you always do, Marcus. You found someone weaker than you, someone who loved you unconditionally, and you bled them entirely dry. I tossed the heavy stack of banking statements onto the ruined rug right at Tasha's feet. Tasha looks down at the papers, her split lip still slowly dripping bright red blood onto her chin. Her eyes scan the text, and she reads the names printed clearly at the top of the foremost statement. It is the name of her mother and father. You went to your parents, Marcus Ritter state, projecting my voice so the entire room of investors and socialites understands the absolute chilling depths of his moral depravity. You went to the aging parents who spent their entire lives scraping by on a modest middle-class salary just to give you a comfortable childhood. You sat in their fully paid-off retirement home in the suburbs, and you lied directly to their faces. You told them you had a guaranteed zero-risk investment opportunity. You convinced them to sign over the deed to their home as collateral for a high-yield commercial bridge loan. Tasha lets out a strangled, horrified gasp. Her legs give out again, and she drops to her bruised knees, grabbing the banking statements with violently shaking hands. She flips frantically through the pages, her eyes scanning the brutal, undeniable mathematical truth printed in black and white. He mortgaged your parents' retirement home, Tasha, I say, directing my words down at her kneeling, trembling figure. He took out a $2.5 million primary lien against the only tangible asset your family actually owned. He used their life savings to blindly fund a corporate merger that I specifically and intentionally designed to fail. Tasha lets out a low, agonizing moan that sounds like a wounded animal. Because Marcus has officially defaulted on the primary Vanguard agreement, all subordinate collateral is automatically seized to satisfy the breach of contract penalty. I explain, my voice perfectly level and entirely devoid of mercy. Vanguard Holdings now holds the exclusive uncontested deed to your parents' house. We are initiating foreclosure proceedings tomorrow morning at 9:00 sharp. Your mother and father have exactly 30 days to vacate the premises before the county sheriff physically removes them from the property. The absolute crushing weight of this revelation completely shatters whatever tiny fragment of sanity Tasha had left. It is one thing to lose her fake aristocratic lifestyle, her leased luxury cars, and her designer gowns. It is an entirely different level of hell to realize that her beloved brother just rendered their elderly parents completely homeless and destitute. Tasha breaks down. She does not scream with rage this time. She collapses forward, weeping with a profound, soul-crushing despair. She crawls across the blood-stained Persian rug toward me, completely abandoning her pride, her arrogance, and her entire identity. She reaches out with her trembling, manicured hands and desperately grabs the torn, bloody silk hem of my evening gown. Nia, please. Tasha sobs, her voice reduced to a pathetic, broken whimper. She looks up at me, tears streaming rapidly down her face, mixing with the blood from her split lip. Please do not do this. Take the cars. Take Preston's failing law firm. Let them seize Chloe's condo. Take everything we have. But please, I am begging you, on my hands and knees, do not take my parents' house. She clutches the silk fabric tighter, sobbing uncontrollably. They are in their 70s, Nia. My father has a severe heart condition. They have nowhere else to go. They will literally die on the street. Please, you know them. They were always kind to you. They welcomed you into the family. Do not punish them for what Marcus did. I will do anything you want. I will work for you. I will pay you back every single cent. Just please spare my parents. I look down at the woman who spent the last 5 years relentlessly mocking my conservative clothing, my career, and my very existence. She is quite literally kissing the marble ground I walk on, crying into the hem of my ruined dress, begging for a scrap of mercy from the woman she called a feral street beggar just 30 minutes ago. The irony is absolutely poetic, but it does not move my heart a single inch. I look at her tear-stained face, feeling nothing but a cold, clinical detachment. They raised a son who thought he could casually order his wife's death over a loud nightclub phone call. I reply, my voice perfectly flat and entirely devoid of empathy. They raised a daughter who thought financial debt made her royalty, and who ruthlessly bullied anyone she deemed beneath her. They enabled your toxic delusions, Tasha, and they aggressively coddled his blinding arrogance. They created the monsters that just destroyed their lives. I look up at Marcus, making sure he hears every single word. I am not punishing your parents, Tasha. I am simply executing a legally binding corporate contract. Your brother recklessly gambled their survival on his own fragile ego, and he lost absolutely everything. Vanguard Holdings is a ruthless financial institution, not a charity. We do not grant sentimental reprieves for incredibly bad bets. The house is gone. I gently but firmly pull the silk fabric of my gown out of her desperate clinging hands. I take a step back, completely severing any physical connection to the Vanguard family forever. Take them to the freight elevator, Vance, but I command, turning my back on the weeping woman on the floor. I am entirely finished with them. Vance nods sharply. His men move in without hesitation, grabbing Tasha by the arms and hauling her off the floor. She kicks and screams, sobbing for her parents, completely broken. Marcus is practically catatonic, his eyes glazed over in shock as he is dragged backward toward the service exit. The utter finality of their destruction is absolute. The elite crowd of investors watches the total eradication of the Vanguard family in stunned, terrified silence. But just as the security contractors begin to muscle the broken family toward the heavy metal doors of the service corridor, a sudden dark and incredibly sinister chuckle echoes from the far side of the room. I turn around slowly. Preston is standing up. He violently shoves off the security contractor holding his arm. He wipes a thick smear of bright red blood from his deeply scratched cheek with the back of his hand. His expensive gray suit is torn and completely disheveled, but the sheer suffocating panic that consumed him just moments ago has mysteriously vanished. He straightens his spine, rolling his shoulders back. His lips slowly curl into a wicked, desperate, and incredibly dangerous smile. He reaches into his ruined suit jacket pocket and pulls out his smartphone. He looks directly at me, his eyes gleaming with the unpredictable, explosive energy of a man who has absolutely nothing left to lose. "You are a brilliant corporate strategist, Nia," Preston says, his voice dripping with a dark, venomous satisfaction that sends a sudden chill through the room. "I will absolutely give you that. You played us flawlessly. You stripped us of our wealth, our dignity, and our homes. You destroyed my marriage and my career in a single night, but you made one massive, fatal miscalculation in your grand master plan." Preston taps a few buttons on his illuminated screen, holding the phone up high for me to see. "You forgot that a failing, desperate lawyer will always keep a dead man's switch." Preston sneers, his thumb hovering dangerously over the send button. "You think you can just walk away cleanly after systematically destroying my entire life? Let us see how the untouchable chairwoman of a $3 billion medical empire handles a massive, highly illegal data breach. I am about to burn your entire company to the absolute ground." The room holds its collective breath as Preston stands tall, blood still dripping from the deep scratches on his cheek. He waves his smartphone in the air like a loaded weapon. He wants me to flinch. He wants to see a crack in my composure. But I simply cross my arms and wait for him to play his final pathetic card. "You think you outsmarted a licensed corporate attorney?" Preston sneers, his chest heaving, as he steps away from the security contractors. "You think signing those divorce papers sealed Marcus's fate? You thought you could just hide behind a wall of shell companies and blind trusts laughing at us while we struggled. But your absolute arrogance has just handed me the key to destroying your entire empire." Preston turns to the wealthy investors still huddled by the bar. He adopts the booming, theatrical voice of a trial lawyer delivering a closing argument to a jury. He is performing for his life. "This woman," Preston announces, pointing a rigid finger at me, "entered into a legal marriage contract while actively and maliciously concealing a net worth of over $3 billion. She funneled marital assets, her own income, and her corporate dividends into offshore accounts and ghost corporations. She completely excluded her legal spouse from his rightful stake in their shared economic partnership." Preston turns his manic, bloodshot eyes back to me. His grin is practically feral. In the state jurisdiction where your marriage license is filed, that is not just a minor clerical error. That is the exact definition of fraudulent misappropriation of marital assets. It is a massive, deliberate financial deception. I watch Preston piece his desperate theory together. He is speaking rapidly, adrenaline flooding his system. He walks over to the marble coffee table and points down at the signed divorce documents that I used to trigger the Vanguard default just moments ago. You thought you were so incredibly clever having Marcus sign an absolute asset waiver tonight? Preston laughs a sharp barking sound. You thought you trapped him. But any first-year law student knows that a waiver is completely and utterly void if it is signed under fraudulent pretenses. You did not disclose your true net worth on the asset disclosure forms. You lied by omission on a legally binding court document. Therefore, the waiver is completely invalidated. Preston takes a deep breath, savoring the absolute gravity of his next sentence. He looks directly at my husband, who is still being held by the collars of his ruined velvet jacket by two massive security contractors. Because the waiver is void. Preston shouts, his voice echoing off the glass walls. Marcus is legally entitled to his full marital share. The law is incredibly clear on this matter. Marcus is entitled to exactly 50% of all assets acquired or grown during the 5 years of your marriage. He is legally entitled to 50% of Vanguard holdings. The number hangs in the air, heavy and electric. $1.5 billion. I look at Marcus. The physical transformation is completely sickening. Just seconds ago, he was a broken, sobbing mess, dragging himself across the floor in absolute despair. But the moment Preston utters the phrase $1.5 billion, the weeping stops entirely. Marcus stops struggling against the security guards. His head snaps up. The tears dry instantly on his bruised and swollen face. A dark, twisted spark of pure, unadulterated greed ignites in his eyes. The crushing shame of losing his job, his mistress, and his dignity is completely wiped away by the intoxicating promise of unimaginable wealth. He actually believes Preston. He believes he has found a legal loophole that will not only save his life, but elevate him to the billionaire status he has always craved. Marcus straightens his spine completely, ignoring the hands gripping his jacket. He looks at me, and that familiar, arrogant, condescending smirk slowly creeps back onto his bloody face. You hear that Nia Marcus spits out his voice, suddenly dripping with a renewed toxic confidence. You thought you could leave me with nothing. You thought you could crush me. But you just legally handed me half of your entire empire. I am going to take $1.5 billion from you, and I am going to spend every single cent of it destroying whatever is left of your miserable life. Preston taps the screen of his smartphone, stepping closer to me. The threat is fully formed now. He has constructed his weapon. I have a digital drafted complaint for fraudulent misappropriation ready to file directly to the state Supreme Court. Preston threatens, his voice dropping to a low, sinister register. The second I hit, send it triggers a mandatory, highly public discovery process. A judge will immediately freeze every single Vanguard account. The media will descend on your pristine medical technology firm. Your board of directors will panic. Your stock prices will plummet. I will tie your entire $3 billion empire up in a messy, highly publicized 10-year legal battle. Preston stops just a few feet away from me. He thinks he has backed me into a corner. He thinks he has completely checkmated the Supreme Chairwoman. But I am a reasonable man. Preston continues, leaning in close, offering his extortion terms. I will delete this file right now. I will make sure Marcus walks away quietly. All you have to do is drop the Vanguard penalty against me, force Harrison to reinstate my law license, and wire a lump sum settlement of $50 million into my offshore escrow account by tomorrow morning. You pay us to disappear, or I burn your entire life to the ground. The penthouse is dead silent. The Vanguard family holds its collective breath, waiting for me to surrender. Marcus is grinning. Tasha has stopped crying, looking up from the floor with a sudden glimmer of desperate hope. Preston stands tall, his thumb resting heavily on the screen of his phone, ready to unleash total legal warfare. They actually believe they have won. They believe a frantic, bleeding, disgraced lawyer has outsmarted a woman who built a global corporate syndicate from nothing. I look at Preston's phone. Then I look at Marcus's greedy, smiling face. I do not show fear. I do not show panic. I simply tilt my head perfectly serene and prepare to shatter their last remaining sliver of hope into a million microscopic pieces. I slowly reach back into the black leather portfolio. I do not pull out another corporate banking document. I pull out a thick, heavy medical file. The pristine edges of the folder are smeared with my own dried blood from the emergency room. I raise it high, holding Preston's frantic gaze, before slamming it down onto the marble coffee table with a violent crack that makes both men jump. "You really should have practiced criminal law, Preston," I say, my voice ringing with absolute chilling finality, "because your grasp on family court statutes is astonishingly weak. You claim Marcus is entitled to 50% of my assets, but you completely bypass the state's marital forfeiture laws." I tap the blood-stained file. 3 hours ago, I was bleeding out on a trauma gurney. The hospital called my legal next of kin for emergency surgical consent. Marcus answered that call from the VIP booth of this very penthouse. I have the certified hospital audio recording of my husband instructing the chief of surgery to pull the plug so he would not be burdened with a medical bill while entertaining his mistress. Marcus's face instantly drains of the toxic color that just returned to it. His jaw hangs slack. He realizes that his flippant, cruel phone call was not a private joke shared with Chloe, but a legally documented execution order. Under the state penal code, I state my voice echoing like a judge reading a death sentence, denying life-saving medical treatment to a dependent spouse constitutes felony reckless endangerment. And under the spousal forfeiture statutes, any partner who actively endangers the life of their spouse with malicious intent immediately, completely, and irrevocably forfeits all legal rights to any shared marital property, equitable distribution, or financial claims. Preston's phone slowly slips from his trembling fingers, clattering uselessly against the marble floor. His grand blackmail scheme evaporates into thin air. He knows I am right. "There is no 50%, Marcus," I whisper, leaning closer so he can see the absolute void in my eyes. "There is no massive settlement. By actively trying to kill me tonight to enjoy this party, you legally stripped yourself of every single penny I own. You receive absolutely nothing from my empire. But you do retain every single ounce of the debt you accumulated under your own signature. You will spend the rest of your pathetic life working minimum wage to pay off a $15 million corporate deficit." I turn my gaze away from my shattered husband and step directly into Preston's personal space. The tall, disgraced lawyer is trembling so violently I can hear his expensive leather shoes squeaking against the marble floor. I lean in close, lowering my voice to a lethal, intimate whisper that makes the hairs on the back of his neck stand straight up. "You really thought you could threaten me with a digital legal complaint?" I whisper, letting the words glide smoothly off my tongue. "But you forgot that transmitting deliberately falsified financial portfolios to a corporate server across state lines constitutes federal wire fraud. And because you used Vanguard's proprietary network to execute the transaction, I had unrestricted administrative access to your entire digital footprint." Preston's breathing completely stops. His eyes bulge with sheer terror. "I did not just freeze your capital tonight, Preston," I continue. "I compiled every single doctored spreadsheet, every coercive email between you and Marcus, and every fraudulent signature you stamped with your firm's seal. I packaged it all into a neat, undeniable digital dossier. And exactly 2 hours ago, while I was walking out of the trauma ward, my legal team transmitted that entire package directly to the white-collar crime division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." As if completely synchronized with my words, the faint, piercing wail of heavy sirens bleeds through the thick, soundproof glass of the floor-to-ceiling windows. The sound grows rapidly louder, echoing aggressively through the concrete canyons of the financial district. Brilliant, frantic flashes of red and blue light begin to reflect off the dark glass of the balcony, painting the horrified faces of the wealthy guests in a violent strobing rhythm. Preston lets out a pathetic, whimpering sob. He falls to his knees, his hands clutching his bleeding face as the absolute reality of a lengthy federal prison sentence crashes down upon his shoulders. The heavy brass doors of the private elevator slide open one final time. A coordinated team of uniformed police officers and plainclothes federal agents storms into the grand foyer. They completely bypass the terrified socialites and march straight into the center of the ruined living room. The lead federal agent, a stern woman holding a thick stack of printed warrants, locks her eyes on the two broken men groveling on my Persian rug. Marcus and Preston, the agent announces her authoritative voice, cutting effortlessly through the thick tension of the penthouse. You are both under arrest. Marcus, you are being charged with felony reckless endangerment and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Preston, you are being taken into federal custody for grand wire fraud, corporate espionage, and financial racketeering. The sharp, heavy metallic click of steel handcuffs echoes through the dead silent room. The agents roughly yank Marcus and Preston to their feet, forcing their arms aggressively behind their backs. The two arrogant men who thought they owned this city are paraded through the crowd of their disgusted, wealthy peers. They are stripped of their dignity, their tailored suits torn and stained with blood, frog marched directly into the elevator as common, unremarkable criminals. The flashing red and blue lights reflect off the penthouse windows one last time before the heavy brass doors slide shut, sealing away the pathetic remnants of my former life. The screaming, the chaos, and the suffocating arrogance all fade into absolute blissful nothingness. The memory dissolves, bringing me back to the quiet sanctuary of my present reality. I sit cross-legged on the plush velvet sofa in my primary residence, miles away from the crime scene I brilliantly orchestrated. The penthouse is completely silent save for the gentle crackle of the modern fireplace. I swirl the remaining dark liquid in my crystal glass. The deep ruby color catches the soft, warm light of the room. I lift the glass to my lips and take a final, deeply satisfying sip of the expensive Cabernet. It tastes like absolute victory. It tastes like pure, unadulterated freedom. I look directly forward, allowing the stillness of the room to settle over me. If society has taught women anything, it is the incredibly dangerous, highly toxic myth of mandatory forgiveness. We are constantly told to be the bigger person. We are heavily conditioned to turn the other cheek, to swallow our righteous anger, to suffer in silence, and to heal privately, while the people who maliciously broke us walk away without a single scratch. We are expected to excuse brutal betrayal as a simple human mistake. I reject that pathetic narrative entirely. There is absolutely no room in my life for toxic forgiveness. The men and women who tried to destroy me did not deserve my grace. And they certainly did not deserve my mercy. They deserved exactly what they received. The most effective revenge is never loud, and it is never physically violent. The absolute best revenge is simply stepping aside, unlocking the cage, and letting their own unchecked greed burn their entire existence down to ashes. Marcus, Preston, Chloe, and Tasha completely destroyed themselves. I just provided the financial matches and stood back to watch the beautiful inferno. To any woman watching this who feels trapped in a room that is far too small for her brilliance, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Never shrink yourself to accommodate the fragile, pathetic ego of a small-minded partner. Do not ever dim your natural radiant light just to cast a larger shadow for a completely worthless man. Do not hide your intelligence, your wealth, or your capabilities just to make someone else feel comfortable in their own mediocrity. If he cannot handle your monumental success, your absolute power, or your sharp intellect, he does not deserve a seat at your table. Let him starve in the dark. You are the sole architect of your own empire. Build it as high as you possibly can, reinforce the walls with your own unyielding standards, and never apologize for the immense space you take up in this world. I set the empty crystal glass down on the polished mahogany table. The quiet hum of the city continues far below a world I conquered completely on my own terms. The warm, ambient lights in the living room slowly begin to dim, casting long, peaceful shadows across the floor. I lean back against the soft cushions, perfectly content, entirely whole, and absolutely untouchable. The room grows quiet. The glow softens, and everything slowly fades into total blackness.